And so what we want to do is we want to teach them how to fish. And that's the purpose of social problem solving, is really teaching that fundamental skill that obviously has a great deal of importance. There are many models out there on social problem solving. The one that we use in our practice is called social thinking, which was developed by a woman named Michelle Garcia-Winter, who's a speech-language pathologist. Strangely enough, although a speech-language pathologist was the one who devised this, a lot of it is rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what I provide as a psychologist. And the premise here is that it's not all about behavior, it's about our thoughts surrounding social behavior, it's about the social consequences of our choices, and basically teaching a way of thinking and not just a way of acting. So it basically is teaching students not just how to behave, but to analyze their behavior, analyze their thought process, and to think about how their behavior impacts others. When we take a look at social skills training, the same flaw comes up over and over again, and that is a flaw with generalization. Generalization is getting the student to take what he or she has learned in the therapeutic setting or in the school setting and apply it elsewhere. And this has been so commonly found that I've nicknamed generalization social skills kryptonite. It really interferes with our ability to get kids to take the skills that they've learned and to use them in the real world. The good news is, since we're aware of the generalization flaw, we can kind of address it by utilizing a number of different tools. One of them, of course, is one that we're all familiar with, which is modeling. What we do is showing them an example of the social skills that we would like to see. We don't expect perfection out of our teens, so we don't pretend to be perfect ourselves, but how we act in social situations, how we socialize, serves as an example for them. We also, of course, when teaching social problem solving, we use prompting. At the most basic level, when we're teaching kids how to be polite or use good manners, we prompt them, what's the magic word, or what do you need to say? That's prompting at its most simple format. But obviously we can prompt any particular social skill or social problem solving strategy that we want to see. We want to provide frequent feedback and reinforcement to them so that they know what it is that they're doing is appreciated. We want to collaborate with as many people as possible because that will promote the generalization. And we want to include the parents, certainly, because if the parents don't know what's going on, how are they going to help the student outside of the setting that it's learned? So for example, a lot of the students that I work with have a lunch bunch or something like that at school, and I ask the parents, what do you know about the group? And the most common answer is nothing. When the parents don't know what's happening in the program, how much utility does the program have? Because the parents can't really capitalize on that. And who is a better advocate and ally for a student than the parents? So it's very important that the parents be included in this process and that they have an understanding of what it is that's being taught and what it is that's being learned. Just like any other skill that we would teach a child, they need to have practice in order to build towards mastery. And yet, when we think in a therapeutic context, we usually think of, well, I'm bringing my teen to the therapist and they're going to work and come back in a week or whatever it may be. But of course, if you're working with your teen to get better in any skill, you wouldn't just have them show up at a recital and that's how they get better at their instrument. Or we wouldn't just have them show up for the game and that's how they get better at the sport. We, of course, have them practice between those events. And that's one of the things that I like to emphasize is that if you are interested in improving your child's social skills, that work needs to be done continuously and not just with a drop-off procedure. And the research actually shows that students who do homework as part of social skills training actually show twice the amount of improvement as those that do not. So while homework may be perceived as a dirty word, when we use it in the context of practice, it's very useful. The thing that actually brought me to Princeton Speech and Language is something that Terry Rossman, the founder and director of Speech and Language, developed, which is called the social village. The social village is a fantastic thing, and I don't want to sound like a salesman, but it was that good that it made me change my job. The social village basically is an environmental setup that gives students between the ages of 8 and 23 an opportunity to socialize in a safe environment with supportive staff and while engaging in activities that they already find fun. And when I first heard about this from one of my clients, I immediately contacted Terry and said, can I take a tour? And I think she was concerned that I was going to try and steal her idea and make it my own. But what I really wanted to see was, what is this all about? And I was blown away. She had already it was like she had read the minds of kids and their interests, and especially the kids that struggle socially, in terms of what are they interested in. So there's a room that's for Pokemon, a room for Minecraft, a room for Legos, a room for interactive video games, a room for role-playing games. And that doesn't mean that you can only participate in one room. But the idea is to make an interesting environment for kids that struggle socially and give them an opportunity to actually practice the skills that they're learning elsewhere. This is something that there are lots of kids that this is what they look forward to on the weekends. I'm looking forward to going to the social village on Friday or on Saturday. There are regulars, there are other people that it's just give it a try. But it really gives students a wonderful opportunity to practice the skills that they're learning in a different context. In the essence of time, I'm going to kind of wrap up, and one of the questions that I often get asked is, what can I do to help my child with their social skills? And another clinician out there came up with the 4 Ps. And the 4 Ps that I recommend people follow, the first is pointing out. So pointing out is showing the student, showing the teenager, these are pro-social behaviors, these are asocial, antisocial behaviors. Basically, again, training them to be observational learners. I even like to joke with people, it doesn't even have to be in live reality. When your child's watching a TV show or a movie, there are social skills being displayed as long as there's more than one character on the screen. Some of them may be good examples of social skills, some may be poor examples, but in either case, it's a learning opportunity. And so I encourage parents to sit down and watch TV with their kids and give them feedback and ask questions. If you do that every time they sit down, you stop watching TV altogether. That could be a goal. But if you do it occasionally, it does present a learning opportunity and something, again, they're already comfortable with. The second P is prompting, which I mentioned previously. We certainly want to let students know this is the time to utilize the skills that we're talking about. This is a great time to initiate that conversation. What's a good question you could use to start off the conversation? This is a good time to get somebody's phone number because we're about to have winter break, and if you want to have somebody to hang out with, you can't wait until winter break already started. The third P is practice. Obviously, if we want kids to get better, they need to have an opportunity to practice. And the fourth P is praise. This is obviously, pretty pop psychology at this point, but behavior-specific praise is something that's really recommended. My favorite format to use is I like the way that you, and fill in the blank. So for tonight, I like the way that you were very attentive and listened, and there was a pleasure speaking with you. I'll follow to your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. And we're going to continue with Elinor Bashe.
Hi, thanks, Katie, for inviting me, and thank you all for coming out on this rainy night. I think we're all impressed that we didn't have just 2 people. I've been a clinical psychologist in Highland Park for more than about 25 years. I work with children, adolescents, adults. I do psychotherapy and consultation. And I also provide training to psychology doctoral students at Rutgers and at UMDNJ. And I do in the public schools and in the private schools. I've done consultations with staff and child study teams. I really enjoy talking to parent groups like yourselves, and I've done that in various and sundry places that don't really matter to you all over the state. But my specialty areas include therapy with children and teens who, as you mentioned, are out of the box. Whether it be because they're creative, gifted, have learning disabilities, depression, anxiety, or some combination of those issues, because some of them often go together. And I also provide consultation to parents about dealing with some of these issues at home and at school. Each of us has been asked to be fairly brief, so I'm going to talk about one of the key factors that I really think can contribute to emotional wellness and health in teens. The idea that I want to highlight for you is the idea of self-awareness. And we think of self-awareness as kind of understanding yourself, understanding your feelings, your thoughts, your behavior. And it may sound important to develop for its own sake, but it may not be clear how knowing those kinds of things about yourself can directly impact psychological health and wellness. So let me explain. The specific, see, I like to fidget. The specific aspect of self-awareness that I want to focus on is understanding your strengths and weaknesses. I'm going to give you 3 steps as parents that you can think of yourself as I'm talking. Think about yourself as teens And also think of going home to your teens and talking to your teens about these things. So I want you to kind of have a dual awareness as we're talking, to think back on your own adolescence and also to think about where your teens are. So the first of 3 steps is the idea of knowing your strengths and weaknesses. Ask yourself some of these questions. What do you know about what comes easily to you? Now hopefully we're all at the age where we know something about ourselves. Hopefully we're a little ahead of our teenagers in terms of self-awareness. But think about, what do you know about what you love, what you take pride in, what makes you feel happy, and think about how much time you get to focus on these things or get to pursue them. Okay, then on the flip side, think about what might be difficult for you. What makes you feel out of your comfort zone, or what issues push your buttons. And then think about how you feel about your struggles and how you may be tackling them. So I'd like to see a show of hands. I'm going to first ask you about your teens, right? When you think about your teens in terms of strengths and weaknesses, how many do you think that as parents, our primary focus should be on helping them in their areas of difficulty or weakness? Is that okay? Well, okay, so if you're thinking, and it's not, okay, so if you're thinking of strengths and weaknesses, right? As parents, do we want to put, I'm sort of asking one at a time because I can't ask you which one because there's 2 opposite answers. So we're either going to put more of our focus on helping them improve in their areas of difficulty and weakness, or we're going to put more of our energy as parents into helping them amplify their strengths. Okay, so that's a little fair. So how many do you think that we should as parents be helping them improve in their areas of weakness?
It's got to be a
Combination
combination of both.
of both?
Okay.
Okay.
You're struggling with that. You get
Right. Well, I guess I was sort of saying if you had to kind of weigh it, which way would this seesaw tip a little bit? Strength?
I mean, I want to say that, but the reality of what comes out of that is actually a lot more focused on, like, you need to change this, or I need to help you with this, or you're not seeing this, or so what actually plays out in our home is a lot more focused on the weaknesses. I'm realizing by you asking this question.
Right, and I really thank you for sharing that because I think that's an excellent point, right? Philosophically, we all know that what's going to bring our teens to their best selves, to their optimism, to their hopefulness, to their motivation and energy in line with what you were talking about is focusing on their strengths, right? Thanking them, acknowledging them for their positive behavior. But as human beings and as parents who feel responsible for sending off an 18-year-old that can survive in the world, you know, we get nervous and we feel like it's our job to help them fix the problems. So I think that's, you know, when we know our strengths, we can see this, right? We can put time and energy into things that overlap with our interests. So it's really important through the middle school and especially high school years for kids to start to understand their strengths and understand their passions so that they know where the path to satisfaction and success is going to be in their lives. It's important for all of us. I mean, think of yourself as an adult too. You enjoy your time more when you feel competent than when you feel incompetent. And that helps us, as I said, stay motivated and hopeful about the future. I worked with one teen, for example, who wanted to be a doctor. He was really bright, he really enjoyed the sciences, so he decided to volunteer in an emergency room. And when he got there, he realized he did not like the gory stuff and the blood. Okay, so thank goodness, right? That was important to know before he ended up doing well enough in college to end up in medical school, which he certainly could have done. So had he not taken the time to investigate how he would actually feel about the practice of medicine, he would have put a lot of time into pursuing something that wasn't a good fit. Another high school student I worked with really loved some of the creative arts. So she loved acting, she loved creative writing, and she made time for both. But over time, she realized that she was getting a lot of good feedback for her writing. She got things published and published by e-publishers and was selling things herself online. But she wouldn't have such success when she would audition. Like if she would get in, she would maybe get a small, friend of the best friend of the lead character who had a few lines over here, but she didn't really ever get anything too significant. So she decided that when it came time to thinking about what was she going to pursue as a career and as a path, that writing would make a lot more sense to base her interests on than assuming she could do something professionally with acting. Not to say that she wouldn't still enjoy acting and she, could do that, but she really needed to kind of assess, well, where really am I getting positive feedback and where really do my strengths and talents lie? I think that when you find a fit between your talents and your goals, you're much more likely to feel satisfied rather than perpetually frustrated. And it's that satisfaction that gives us a sense of well-being. Some of us as adults change career paths midstream, right? I mean, I had friends from high school who ended up becoming lawyers and found out that they actually hated working in a law firm, or doctors and didn't, ended up going into research because they didn't really want to deal with all the insurance forms and everything. Now, to your point, sometimes we also have to make room in our lives for things that aren't strengths, whether that's improving on something or even tackling something that we're not so good at. So it can be fun to go ice skating, even if you're not very coordinated. You just wouldn't want to spend most of the energy in your life on not falling down, right? So we may want to address our weaknesses to improve on them. You don't want your kids to avoid things that don't come easily to them, but I think it's really important to know which is which. So it's important to say, okay, it's fine to be a beginner here. You may not be so great at it. That's okay. You don't have to only do things you're good at, as long as they know that that's an area where they have to have expectations of themselves that are realistic. So if step one is knowing your strengths and weaknesses, step two for the teens is feeling comfortable acknowledging their strengths and weaknesses, whether to themselves or to others. And that's not easy. It's not always easy for us to feel comfortable with our own weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and it's certainly not always easy for teens to feel that way. They can feel very self-conscious about imperfections, like they're problems that they have to fix or we have to fix in them. And this can focus on anything when you're a teen, right? We all remember on looks, on talents, on how popular you are, on whether you have a boyfriend or girlfriend. It's very easy for teens to feel like there's something wrong with them and become very self-critical. Instead, I encourage you to help your teen really come to believe, which is not easy, that part of being human is having imperfections and having limitations. We all have them. Adults don't have an easy time being self-accepting either. But a lot of stress and anxiety can come from that feeling of constantly not measuring up. And when teens feel constantly like they're reminded of how they're not good enough or how they're not worthwhile, and again, this doesn't come necessarily at all from parents. They can do this to themselves. It chips away at their self-confidence, and it can really contribute to depression if they're constantly focusing on where they fall short. It helps them keep a balanced perspective of themselves to talk to them about strengths and weaknesses. We all have talents and struggles, and it's not always an easy thing to remember. Self-acceptance doesn't mean deciding that we're perfect, because we're all working on getting better at something, whether it's improving a skill, becoming a more kind and patient human being. We all, again though, are more likely to feel motivated when we can accept our limitations, because otherwise self-criticism can really sap your energy and sap your motivation. And I think that, self-improvement is a great goal, but I think celebrating our strengths and celebrating your team's talents and achievements is going to be really key to maintaining a sense of optimism and well-being. Doesn't mean you want to get them to be bragging or egotistical. I think you kind of get a sense of not going over the top. But we get so focused on imperfections that we forget sometimes to acknowledge the positives, both in ourselves, the teens do that to themselves too, and what we do to them. And it's sort of ironic, right? Because you sort of feel like, how could self-improvement be a bad goal? But that's why I'm talking about the idea of balance. From a practical standpoint, though, how does this help, right, when you're sending them out into the world? I'll give you step 3. So if step 1 is understanding your strengths and weaknesses, and step 2 is becoming comfortable with them, step 3 is learning to ask for help and advocate for yourself if you're a teen. And I'll give you another example. So a student I was working with in high school decided that when she got to college, she didn't want to think of herself as having a mild learning disability, which she did, or having ADHD, which she did. She didn't want to use them as excuses. So she decided she was going to forego first semester freshman year any accommodations. She didn't want to deal with the disabilities office. She just wanted to, she felt like if she put enough effort into it, she was motivated, she was going to be able to just handle things. So she really struggled, because what happened was the professor saw her as being disrespectful instead of just being distracted. They misinterpreted her needs to take breaks every so often as being uninterested. And she sort of learned the hard way. You know, speaking of taking the reins and having to kind of drive your own chariot. Once she was willing, though, to ask for help at the beginning of the second semester, she really thrived. She became much more willing to explain what she needed. She was able to really let go of the embarrassment and the shame of needing help. I think it's very hard for teens sometimes to feel like that's okay. It doesn't make them any less. Needless to say, she was, did better in classes. Her grades improved. She felt a lot less anxious about the academics, so she could be able to really enjoy the rest of college life. The idea of being independent for teens sometimes gets confused with doing it all on your own. They think that being independent means they have to do everything by themselves. And I think, unfortunately, traditional schools can sometimes inadvertently teach them that, because if you think about how they're constantly taking tests, right, you can't ask for help. You have to do it all on your own. To speak to your point, though, when you get into the work world, you never sit there and have a project to work on without consulting a team member or booking something. I mean, what would we all do without being able to look on the internet with something, for something? So I think it's important to explain to your teens that wanting to handle some things on your own doesn't mean you have to do everything on your own, because no adult is completely self-sufficient either.